Time is just gone 8:48 a.m. and the vaccine discussion, the vaccine debate is going to continue for a very, very long time. Now, there are many cynics when it comes to vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines. And the key question here is how are these COVID-19 vaccines approved? We're joined on the line this morning by Mohamed Hoosen Suleman from the University of KwaZulu-Natal's Medical School. Mohammed, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. I hope you and the listeners are safe and well.
Yes, alhamdulillah, and as well, same with you as well. Welcome to the show this morning, Mohammed. Now, Mohammed, obviously, we've seen the rollout of vaccines that have officially now begun in South Africa last week. And just before we get to, understanding some of the other issues, the key question here is the process that is involved in approving a vaccine for use in South Africa. What would they be?
Approval of a vaccine in South Africa is done essentially by the health regulator, SAHPRA, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. SAHPRA looks at primarily three key aspects. These are, it's the safety, it's the efficacy, and the quality. If the vaccine does not meet these criteria, then they simply cannot be approved for use in the country. By the way, this is the standard used by almost all of the health regulators worldwide. But I think we should focus on South Africa, that pharmaceutical companies, they create the vaccine. These companies then conduct what is called preclinical trials and clinical trials. And these are important because they're done, or the clinical trials are important because they are done on humans, and there are 4 phases. So as the vaccine is being tried and it's tested on humans, those results are then submitted to SAHPRA through an application for approval process. So what's contained in that application? The information present in those papers are about how many humans have participated in the trial. Did the participants experience side effects, and if so, to what extent? Then also, how many of them were protected from infection by the vaccine? All of the information is then reviewed by a team, and if the vaccine has an efficacy of greater than 50%, it should be approved. So it's quite a lengthy and a complex process, but in a nutshell, that's how it works.
Yes. Now, Mohammed, when one looks at a vaccine, if it is approved in other countries, and we've seen it with the AstraZeneca vaccine as well, does this necessarily mean that South Africa can easily approve the vaccine for use, taking into account, and we've seen what has happened in our case, a new variant as far as the COVID-19 pandemic is concerned?
That's a good question. So ideally, that would be the case whereby SAHPRA, they can easily approve the vaccine because the FDA or the UK health regulator has approved it. Now, the FDA is the United States the Food and Drug Administration. But with the emergence of the new variant and it being quite prevalent in South Africa, things get a whole lot more complex. We then need local data, meaning that the vaccine trials and the tests that are done, it has to be on the South African population. So the vaccine has to be tested on the 501Y.V2. It's on that, on the mutation, on the variant. We already know from previous information and the data that the vaccine is safe. Safety isn't the issue here. The question is about the efficacy. And fortunately for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it has proven to be effective against the 501Y.V2 variant. Therefore, it is now being rolled out. The AstraZeneca vaccine, on the other hand, it has shown to not be effective. So the rollout was stopped, and for that batch, so it's now being sent to the African Union for distribution to the other African countries.
Yes. Now, also, Mohammed, what is important to understand is once a vaccine is approved in South Africa, and as we've seen in the case of the AstraZeneca vaccine, we just went ahead, we bought 1.5 million vaccines. And fortunately, we were able to offload that to the AU, as you have just pointed out. But I'm sure there are certain steps for procuring and distributing the vaccine goes. And this is something that I'd like to wrap my mind around and understand what would those steps be.
Well, procuring would be the engagements between the government and the pharmaceutical companies that create the vaccine. The procurement procedure would include discussions about the price, the quantity, and the date of arrival of the vaccine. Distribution is quite a difficult task. Remember, we have to maintain it's the cold chain of the vaccine. The vaccine has to be kept in cooler boxes as they are transported throughout the country. So once the vaccine, it will land at a central point in the country, they are then taken to a warehouse for checking of the quantity and pre-packing. And then it's the distribution to all provinces. So in essence, those are the logistics that are pertaining to the vaccine.
Yes. Now, Mohammed, when we're talking about South Africa, we've heard the president talk about herd immunity, population immunity, this magical number of 40 million. And this is where the question comes in. When do you think we can actually reach a target of 40 million people being vaccinated in this country?
So that's quite an interesting question. Being optimistic, I think I think that by early 2022, because we've heard the minister say that there's enough doses that have been secured to reach our target. We expect about 500,000 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and 9 million of the Pfizer vaccine by the end of March. So I think that it's critical if we can speed up the process of the distribution, and with well-trained nurses and our frontline healthcare workers, so we can reach the target of 40 million people. And that would be early in 2022.
Mohammed, we've heard this talk about the third wave of infections now. This doesn't sound good. And this is always a big debating point. It's a big talking point. How do we even know in the first place whether we're going to have a third wave or we're going to have another variant and the like as well? What is the likelihood of South Africa going through this?
I think South Africa will see a third wave. There's hardly any doubt about that. We should expect a third wave during our winter period. So by June or by July. And the question really is, will South Africa see a fourth wave of infections? And this entirely depends on how fast we can acquire and we can roll out the vaccine. Because by now we quite well know the nature of the pandemic, and we are able to project how and by when the infection rate can start to increase again. Large crowds with no mask wearing, no social distancing, no COVID-19 rules and regulations observed. Those are the kinds of settings that will allow for the infection rate to take off again. let us continue uh, to conscientize people and to warn them of the possibility of the infections and the transmission of the virus.
Well, Mohammed, let's see what happens and if those predictions are correct with the third wave and possibly the fourth wave. And also, as you mentioned, possibly next year, this time, you and I will be having a completely different discussion, perhaps. But for now, because you said early 2022, so, we're looking at a year from now, but I'm sure we'll be having a different discussion. But for now, as always, we thank you. We say Jazakallah to you for your time.
Jazakallah for the opportunity. Thank you.
Mohamed Hoosen Suleman joining us this morning on the question of the vaccine rollout and understanding just some of the other technical issues playing out in the background in terms of vaccine approval, distribution, and the like as well. And interesting to see if we are going to be talking a different language comes next year this time. The time headed for the news and we still got quite a bit to actually talk about this morning. We're still talking with this morning to Rashad Davids, and we're talking about Professor Ibrahim Arnold, who passed away, and he was a former colleague of the late professor. That interview is going to take place at around 9:20 after the financial update. But also the big talking point again has been the WhatsApp privacy changes that are going ahead. And this morning we're talking with Brian Pinnock, cybersecurity expert at Mimecast. So quite a bit on the show still from now right until 10 a.m. We're heading for the news at Al Ansar. Stay with us.